Welcome back to another one of my little tutorials. Those of you who follow my channel regularly might have noticed that I got involved with synth guitars in recent days. Those of you who follow me regularly also know that I'm a Line 6 Helix user. All the synth guitars I do in my videos are done with the Syns in the Line 6 Helix, especially with the legacy synths. Many people have a hard time using them, and many people who I work with says, oh no, synth guitars from the Helix, that doesn't sound very well. Well, in fact, they're not self-explanatory. So I decided to do a little tutorial in which I create synth tones like the one you just heard, and I'm going to create that on the fly, and you can follow me along and build the tone for yourself on your device. It will also work on a stomp because it only uses one path. Yeah, so that's that. Before we do all of that, I want to delve shortly into the topic of synthesizers. I'm a guitar player. I'm not an expert on synth. I do use some of them. I own two hardware synths, which I play every now and then. And I'm going to explain the basic components of a synthesizer using my trusty Nord Rec 2, which I used back in the good old times to do the synths on the Inversion albums. Yeah, actually there are three very important modules of a synthesizer. The first being the oscillators. A synthesizer generates a wave. Each oscillator is capable of producing a wave, for example, a sine wave, a triangle wave, other waveforms as well, square wave, white noise, what have you. The Nord Rec is equipped with two oscillators, and you can choose the waveform for each oscillator, mix them against each other, tune them, and then you've got the basic sound of your synth ready. The next component, which is very important, is the amplifier, which shapes the envelope of the signal. An audio signal can generally be divided into four parts: the attack, decay, sustain, and release. ADSR curve, we also call it. The attack is the time it takes when you press a key on your keyboard for the sound to reach its maximum amplitude. The decay is the next phase. The decay is the time it takes from reaching the maximum volume to decreasing to the point in which sustain sets in. Sustain then is the phase in which the volume doesn't change. It stays the same. That's what sustain is. And release is the part when I release the key on the keyboard, how much sound, how long does it take for the sound to fade out. And that is basically an envelope filter. A guitar has a very short attack. If I pluck the string, the note is there. It has a very short decay and release, and a decay and sustain, pardon me, and it has almost no release. The last important module is the filter. The filter in a synthesizer in the Nord Rec 2 is basically a low pass, a high pass, or a band pass. If you combine the two, you can set up frequency, you can set up an ADSR curve for the filter as well, which is not possible in the Helix. And you can set up resonance, which is also not possible in the Helix, but you do have filters in the Helix, and we're going to talk about them. And these three parts are the most important parts of a synth. There are other parts as well. I'm not going to go into them as they cannot be easily replicated within the Helix. But these three parts I'm going to, well, find analogs in the Helix, which are capable of doing the tone shaping just like you would do on a regular synthesizer. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to open HXEdit now and then step by step build the patch in question with you. So follow along. Here we are in HXEdit, and I've already set up one important block here, the compressor block, which is going to go first. That block is very important when dealing with the Helix synths for two reasons. First of all, you need to address the envelope filter, and you can do that here, especially setting the sustain parameter, and you need a whole lot of sustain. Guitars, even Gibson Les Pauls, are, compared to other instruments, not very sustaining. So we need to help that a little bit because we normally want sounds with long sustain when dealing with synthesizers. So I've set this compressor up to
fit to the specific guitar I'm using, in my case a Gibson Les Paul Studio, but some things are always the same. I always take a ratio of 10:1. I always put the attack down to 0 because guitars have a very short attack, and that's not what I want for my Symphony sound. If you want attack in your Symphony sound, you can turn it up here, but I don't want any. I mean, you heard the intro, you heard the goal. I always crank release because I want very long sustain. Yeah, you have to adjust gain, threshold, and level to taste, and you can only do that afterwards because you don't want any string noises to trigger the synth, but you want a loud and sustaining signal. In addition to that, you also need a noise gate, because if you've got string sounds, that's going to trigger the synth later on, and you don't want that. This is also a matter of experimentation, fitting to the specific guitar you are going to use. That works like on the fly for the Les Paul. And now the whole thing sounds like that. And you see how long the sustain has become. That is, of course, the compressor, and it's not a wonder guitar I'm playing here. Okay, so the next thing is going to be the synths. I'm always using the Legacy synth. Let's go here, pitch synth, and then we go straight over to Legacy. There are quite a few cool synths here. I like the Attack synth. I also use the Synthomatic, like the most important synth in the whole collection, I think, because it's very versatile. I always get good results when using the String Theory synth. Some people also like the synth leads. It produces like 80s style lead sounds. Okay, we are going to go for the mellow sound, the lush sound I've shown in the intro. And well, of course, I prepared that beforehand. I mean, this is the Synthomatic, and we're going to look at the parameters and how they relate to a real synthesizer. You've got frequency, which is basically a low-pass filter, and you can determine the frequency where the filter is going to attack the signal. Next thing is Q. If you put up Q very high, it's going to be a very steep cut. If you set it very low, it's going to slowly fade out around the frequency you've dialed in. That makes a lot with the sound. Wave selects a wave, like on the real oscillator, on my real synth. And pitch determines the pitch. There are quite a few settings in pitch, like this is 0. And if you put that up to 50, it's an octave higher. And if you crank it all the way up, it's one more octave higher. And of course, you get the intervals in between by calculating them. I think around 78 is the perfect fifth. I've calculated that beforehand. And back to the octave. You see? And you have to calculate which percentages the other intervals are in the pitch. So you can like tune that like a regular oscillator on a regular synthesizer. Yeah, and you will have to experiment here. I'm not delving in how I calculated that because the video, well, it will be very, very long if I did that. Okay, next thing is I have to choose the wave. I'm going for wave 2. Very, very many high frequencies, high pitch. So I'm going to lower the filter to say 41. Very cool. Not as much of the high stuff going on there anymore. If I raise the Q a little bit, the filter becomes smoother, and I think that is actually a good sound to start with. The second synth I'm going to be using is the String Theory synth, again, Legacy. It's down over here. Here it is. Yeah, and I'm going to use wave 7 on that one. And I'm going to raise the mix to 100% because I don't want any dry guitar signal coming through. I just want the synth sound. I'm going to crank decay as well because I want a long decay. I want a long sustain as well. And if I play that now, you see also a lot of high frequencies around here. which we don't want. So let's lower the filter to say 18%. It has become a little bit better, but you see this filter is not very efficient. I'm going to put these two synths in parallel now, so you can see what they sound like when played at the same time. And then I'm going to apply a filter to the resulting signal. Here's what they sound like evenly mixed. I think the Synthomatic is a little bit loud here, so we're going to turn it down a little bit, say minus 70 dB or something like that. I think that's better. Yet there are very many high frequencies from the string theory synthesizer still coming through, and I want to filter them. There are several ways to do that. Actually, we have got a filter category here, and we have got an auto filter you could introduce here. And you see that this has got all the controls a regular synthesizer filter would have. Actually, I think that's too complicated for the situation in question. When I just wanted to filter out some highs, I usually just use a high cut, which is technically the same as a low pass. I don't have any control about Q here. I just got the high cut, which I'm going to like put at a certain frequency here. I think should be around 6 kilohertz. 6.3 should work here. And it sounds like this now. And you see that's better, a whole lot better. If you want a complicated filtering, you can use the auto filter, but for most situations, this should be enough. So now we've addressed the filter. We've addressed part of the envelope, but not all of it. We addressed sustain and decay. What about attack and release? And to control attack and release on a guitar synth on the Helix, I've developed a little trick. I always go for a delay here in the legacy section. The auto swell delay, where is it? It's down below auto volume echo, pardon me, I always confuse the names. If I dial that up out the box, this is what happens. You see that it has made the attack longer. By the swell parameter, you can determine how long this attack is going to be. This is quite long, so I'm just setting it a little bit shorter. I think this is too short, so I'm setting it a little bit longer again. Yeah, you get the picture. The release is the trail of delays, which this thing is going to leave behind, and you control that in the mix. If you take the mix all the way down, you have the normal release again and the long attack, which is controlled by the swell parameter. And if you take the mix up, the release is going to become longer. You see? Still got some issues with notes I didn't want to trigger, but that is because I'm looking at the screen and playing guitar at the same time. When using the synth, you have to be very, very careful with your damping technique. Only plug the string you want to sound. These synths are monophonic, and you don't want another note ringing. And if you don't look at your fingers, well, you just heard what happens. I'm just going to bring the release down to what it was before. That was like something around here. That sounds okay to me. Fine. So basically, we've addressed envelope, we've addressed filter, we've addressed oscillator. So that is a working synthesizer sound. However, there are a few tricks I still want to show you. Most synthesizers are stereo, and this is all mono we've got here. So how do we make a mono signal stereo? Well, there are a few ways on the Helix, of which I'm going to show you two, basically. The first is you can go to the volume and pen folder, select stereo, and then you've got a stereo imager. This thing is going to take your signal mono in, you press here, and then it's going to make it stereo. The width parameter controls how much stereo the resulting signal should be. So this is 150%. You see it has become stereo and it sounds more synthy that way, you know? And we can turn it up all the way so you see what extreme settings do. Yeah, becomes even more stereo. There's a second trick to make a mono synth in the Helix stereo, it's by introducing stereo modulation. So if I go to the modulation folder again, select stereo, I have all these effects in stereo, and here the Trinity chorus pops up, model of a very popular rack mount stereo chorus. And I'm just going to use it out of the box. It sounds like this. So you see you've got a chorus here as well. If you want to emphasize it being stereo, you can engage the left boost and right boost parameters. And I think for this particular sound, the chorus method sounds better. So I'm going to leave it at the chorus. There is a model of the Dimension D chorus in the legacy section. You can also use that to make stereo imaging. I do that from time to time. It also adds a little high cut to the signal. We've already have the high cut here, so there's no point in introducing it here. But keep in mind, in the legacy section, you do have a model of the Dimension D called Dimension. Maybe you want to fiddle around with that. Okay, last thing is I'm going to introduce reverb, because everything is better with reverb. Since the chorus is stereo, from this point on, our signal is stereo. So we have to choose a stereo reverb or everything gets summed to mono. I'm not going to fiddle around with complicated reverbs here. That might be the topic of another video. I'm just going to introduce the dynamic hall. Set the decay a little bit up, like 7 seconds should be okay. And I normally go for the damping parameter and turn it a little bit down when dealing with synths. It sounds more musical to my ears at least. And here's what that sounds like. Still, the whole thing is monophonic. So you might have watched the intro and says, okay, but I've heard all these voices. How does he do that? I mean, if I play a chord, for example, D major, and plug it, it sounds like that. Only the first note is triggered, the D. Well, I've used a looper here. And I normally place the looper straight before the reverb. And you have to be careful. We need a stereo looper. And I take the one switch looper. I'm not going to do very complicated things, just setting the overdub to say -4 dB. So each new layer becomes 4 dB quieter than the previous one. So that is a basic patch. You would have to assign the looper though to a foot switch, say foot switch 2. Yeah, so you can engage it. Okay, yeah, so that is my basic synth setup on the Line 6 Helix. I hope you liked the video. I hope it was useful to you. If so, you might want to drop me a like. You might even want to subscribe my channel. I'd be very grateful if you did so. And until next time, have fun playing guitar.